On the convict-built bridge at Richmond, a stonemason runs his thumb along a sandstone block cut by a prisoner 200 years before he was born, while the first tour buses idle on the far bank. On Constitution Dock in Hobart, at 5:15, a fishmonger hoses down the night's catch while the harbour water is still black. Along Salamanca Place, before the Saturday crowds arrive, a stall holder lifts a jar of leatherwood honey into the first light and wipes the glass clean with a thumb. This is Tasmania, an island at the bottom of the world that Britain once emptied its prisons into, and the island has never hidden that history. It wears it openly, like a signature. Nearly 1 in 5 Tasmanians traces a line back to a transported felon, and they trace it with pride. Yet before the convict ships came, this same land nearly lost the people already living on it, among them a girl born beside the water on Bruny Island. The road runs down the island's spine, from a waking harbour city to the edge of the world, ending with a single glass of whisky poured in the cleanest air on earth. Before the sun clears the Tasman Sea, a mountain decides what kind of day Hobart will have. From the pinnacle of Kunanyi, 1,271 meters above the harbour, the whole of the city lies below. The waterfront, the rows of stone, the Midlands haze running off beyond. Up here, the boardwalk crosses bare alpine rock. The dolerite columns the locals call the organ pipes, standing in ranks against the wind. Snow can fall in any month of the year, even in January, even at the height of summer. The mountain holds the cloud, or lets it go, and the town below takes whatever the slope sends down. The light moves first on the summit, then slides down the dolerite toward the place where the water meets the working town. At 5:15, the light has not yet reached Constitution Dock, and the day begins the way it has for nearly 2 centuries, in the dark, on the water. This was among the first things the convict ships saw when they came up the Derwent, the working edge of a harbour that has never really stopped working. A punt rides low against the quay, its deck stacked with crates of fish hauled off Storm Bay overnight, weighed out and sold straight off the boat before the cafes behind have unlocked their doors. The gulls know the hour. Each December, the same dock becomes the finish line of the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, the crews coming in, worn down off Bass Strait. But on an ordinary morning, there is only the slap of water, the gulls, and a man counting fish into a bucket by feel. A few meters along the quay, Brook Street Pier rises and falls on the tide, a floating pontoon tied to a colonial waterfront, ferries loading at its edge for the river and the galleries upstream. The new structure floats on the same waterline where prisoners were once landed and counted, the commerce of the present riding on the footings of the past. There is nothing solemn about it now. A deckhand coils a rope. A passenger carries a coffee aboard. The engines turn over, and yet the geography has not changed. The place where men in irons first set foot on the island, now the place where the day's first visitors step off toward the water. The crowd begins to thicken, and it moves up into the rows of sandstone. Salamanca Place runs along the harbour as an unbroken row of Georgian warehouses, the low morning light raking across the chisel marks in the stone. The warehouses were built in the 1830s, the sandstone quarried and cut and laid by men under sentence, every block shaped by someone who had no say in being on the island at all. The row takes its name from the Battle of Salamanca, fought in 1812, a soldier's victory commemorated in the architecture of the convicts who would never have chosen it. Run a hand across the lower courses and the marks are still there, the strokes of the cutting tools pressed into the surface where no plaque explains them. For most of the year, the buildings hold restaurants and galleries and offices, the punitive bones of the place repurposed for pleasure, and the people walking the arcade rarely look down at the stone beneath their feet. Then the doors along the row open, and on one morning a week, Saturday spills out between them. Every Saturday since 1972, Salamanca Market has filled the same convict-cut corridors, roughly 300 stalls, trading in the shade of forced labor. A stallholder sets out his jars in a row along a trestle, turning each one so the leatherwood color catches the sun. Cheese from the island's high pastures, laid out beside bread still warm from the oven, and the smell of doughnuts frying somewhere down the row. The honey comes from bees worked through the leatherwood forests of the West, a flavor that exists almost nowhere else on Earth, set out between warehouse walls that men once cut in chains. The men who cut this stone did not stay on the dock. They were assigned, scattered north up the highway, under sentence, and the prettiest towns on the island are the ones they were sent away to build. "80 kilometers north of Hobart, where the highway runs through dry Midland country the color of straw, the town of Oatlands keeps more Georgian sandstone than anywhere else in Australia. Around 138 buildings cut from the same honey-colored stone and set along a single long street. At the top of the rise, the white sails of Callington Mill turn in the wind, a flour mill first built in 1837 to grind the colony's grain, restored now and working again. The men who quarried this stone and laid these courses had no choice in any of it. And yet, the result is a town so complete that walking its footpath is like stepping into the year it was finished. The mill turns, the grain runs through, and the highway carries on north to a bridge that bought one man his freedom. At Ross, the bridge over the Macquarie River was finished in 1836, one of the oldest bridges still standing in Australia, and across its 3 arches run 186 carved faces, animals, and symbols. A transported stonemason named Daniel Hobart cut every one of them, working details into the sandstone that no engineer required. And for the artistry, he earned a pardon and his liberty. To run a hand across the carved keystones now is to touch the work of a convicted man who turned a sentence into the thing that set him loose. Across the town stands a quieter place where the women were sent. The Ross Female Factory is mostly footings now, low walls and grass where the dormitories once stood, one of the few surviving stations where convict women were held and then assigned out as servants across the colony. The records of these women survive in ledgers, and the historian Hamish Maxwell Stewart, who built the Founders and Survivors Project at the University of Tasmania, has spent years turning those entries back into people. Across a scrubbed table in a Ross cottage, a descendant runs a finger down a photographed page of a convict indent register, past the columns for height and trade and sentence, and stops on a single line. A woman shipped out for stealing cloth, a needlewoman, 7 years. The name at the top of that page now sits at the top of a family tree, traced and framed, and spoken aloud. Nearly 1 in 5 Tasmanians can follow a line back to someone like her, and the line is no longer hidden. The highway bends south now toward the most photographed convict town on the island. At Richmond, the bridge across the Coal River was built between 1823 and 1825 by convict gangs, the oldest stone bridge still carrying traffic anywhere in Australia. Its arches doubled in the still water below. The town around it has become the heartland of convict ancestry tourism, its sandstone cottages full of galleries and tea rooms, the visitors' hands resting on the same parapet the chain gangs laid 200 years ago. There is no shame worn here, only a kind of quiet ownership. Families arriving to stand where an ancestor was once marched in irons, photographing the stone as if it were a portrait of their own blood. What was once a record kept private, a thing whispered or buried, is now printed on the brochures and carved into the souvenirs. The criminal sentence remade into a coat of arms. The pride is real, and so is the stone, and the towns the convicts built run pretty and complete down the spine of the island. But assignment was the soft end of the system, the part where a sentence could become a bridge, or a pardon, or a town. There was a harder end, and every road, every gang, every man who reoffended or ran eventually pointed the same way, south, down the peninsula, to the place there was no leaving. South of Richmond, the land narrows and keeps narrowing, until at Eagle Hawk Neck, the whole of the Tasman Peninsula hangs from the rest of Tasmania by a strip of sand barely 30 meters wide. The colonial authorities saw at once what the geography offered them, a single gateway that could be shut, and across this neck they strung a line of dogs, chained at intervals from shore to shore, some on platforms out in the shallows where a swimmer might try to slip past. The dog line, the men called it. Half-starved animals kept loud through the night with lamps burning between them so that no convict on the peninsula could let himself believe escape was possible. The land itself had been turned into a wall. Just below the neck at Pirates Bay, the same coastline drives the point home, the rock shelf cracked into a grid of tiles so even that the first arrivals took it for paving laid by human hands. Salt and time cut the tessellated pavement, the stone splitting along straight seams over millions of years, and at low water, a person can walk out across it, the squares filling and draining with each wave, and look back at the cliffs that made this peninsula such a faultless prison. At the end of the road stands Port Arthur, the settlement that ran from 1830 to 1877 and held the men the system had given up on, the reoffenders, the runaways, the ones assignment could not bend. The penitentiary still rises 4 stories above the harbor, brick and sandstone, converted in 1857 from a flour mill into cells for hundreds of prisoners, its windows now open to the weather. Up the slope sits the separate prison, opened in 1849, where punishment turned inward. The men were held in silence and near darkness, known by numbers rather than names, hooded when they walked, the body left whole, while the mind was worked on instead. Port Arthur is no longer a prison, but an open-air museum, written onto the World Heritage List in 2010, and it runs now on storytelling. Guides walk visitors through the ruins. Researchers read the registers back into names. Gardeners keep the grass cut and the lamps lit. At dusk, a guide leads a small group into the separate prison, stops at a cell door, sets a hand on the cold iron, and lets a voice that has told this 1,000 times drop into the silence that once broke men, held up now for strangers to feel for a moment and walk back out of. The site carries a more recent grief as well. On an afternoon in April 1996, a gunman killed 35 people here, and the cafe where much of it happened was left a ruin and planted around as a memorial garden, so that the guides who narrate the convict century must hold the recent one too, learning where to slow, where to say less, where a family standing quietly is not to be approached. Out in the harbor lies a low wooded island the settlement kept for its dead. The Isle of the Dead holds more than 1,000 graves, and the divisions of the colony are written into its ground. The free staff and officers buried up the rise beneath carved headstones and names. The convicts laid below them in unmarked rows, anonymous in death as they had been numbered in life. West of the settlement, at Saltwater River, the peninsula kept a punishment inside the punishment. The coal mines worked from 1833, the place Port Arthur sent the men it could not control, set to dig coal from shafts by hand and housed in cells cut underground, the southernmost pit in the empire and the lowest rung of the long fall south. Everything on this road has followed the suffering of men shipped from the far side of the world. But the island they were sent to was not empty when they came, and the older story, the one beneath the convict century, begins not in irons, but on a beach on Bruny Island, where a girl was already watching the ships come up the channel.
South of Hobart, across a channel of cold green water, Bruny Island runs in two long halves, joined by a thread of sand. On a beach here, around 1812, a girl was born into the Nuanon people, a Palawa band whose country this island had been for far longer than any record the newcomers kept could reach. Her name was Truganini. She was a child when the ships began coming up the same channel, and she would live to watch almost everything that followed. When the British landed in 1803, the Aboriginal people of Tasmania numbered in the thousands, divided among nations with their own country and language across the whole island. Within 3 decades, they had been brought close to extinction. The conflict the colonists later named the Black War ran hardest through the late 1820s, as settlers and soldiers drove the original inhabitants off the grasslands the imported sheep now grazed. And the killing went both ways, but never on anything like equal terms. Bounties were paid for the capture of Aboriginal men, women, and children. Disease did the rest. The introduced sicknesses moving through camps already cut off from their land, until a population that had lived on this island for tens of thousands of years had fallen, inside a single human lifetime, to a few hundred. Into that collapse came George Augustus Robinson, a builder turned missionary who walked the island, persuading the survivors to come in under his protection, promising safety and a return home that never arrived. The people who trusted him, Truganini among them, were taken instead to a settlement on Flinders Island, out in Bass Strait, where the wind was wrong and the rations were strange, and the dying did not stop. The community thinning season by season in the place built to preserve it. In 1847, the few who were left were brought back south to Oyster Cove, a damp, former convict station on the Channel, where the same diseases finished much of what Flinders Island had begun. Truganini died in Hobart in 1876, and the colony that had helped destroy her people called her the last of them, a tidy ending that was never true. Against her stated wish to be buried in the mountains or sunk in the deep water of the Channel, her skeleton was exhumed and put on display in the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery, where it stood in a glass case for decades, taken down from public view only in 1947. Only in 1976, 100 years after her death, were her remains at last cremated and scattered on the D'Entrecasteaux Channel in the water she had been born beside. The word "last" was a convenience for the people who used it. The Palawa did not end with Truganini, and their descendants live across Tasmania today, several thousand of them, reclaiming language and country and craft. On a bench above the same channel, a Palawa woman threads a needle through tiny iridescent merina shells. The green shells the women of Bruny Island have strung into necklaces for thousands of years, drawing one after another onto a line that was never quite cut. Above the narrow neck of Bruny Island, at the reserve that carries her name, a stone marker looks out over the water where her ashes went in. No longer the headstone of an ending. The island that came so close to erasing its first people, and then filled with the prisoners of another country, holds both of those histories in the one stretch of ground. And that ground, cleared and worked under sentence, grows something now. Back up the Coal River Valley around Richmond, where the convict gangs once broke the ground, the slopes run in orchard rows and vines now, and the produce of them has become the island's signature. This is the gentler half of the convict story, the part where the sentence became a harvest. At Newtown, a few kilometers north of the Hobart waterfront, the white weatherboard house called Runnymede was built around 1840 on land cleared and worked by assigned convicts. And behind its veranda, the kitchen beds and fruit trees still run in long ordered rows. In its cool stone-floored kitchen, a pair of hands fills a row of jars with stewed apple and screws the lids down warm. The same fruit that once gave Tasmania its older name, the Apple Isle, when orchards across the island shipped millions of bushels north and overseas each year. The land that was opened under sentence feeds people now. That produce includes something the convicts who cleared this ground would never have been allowed to make. Back along the harbour at Battery Point, behind the row of Salamanca warehouses, the old sandstone bond stores, cut by convict hands in the 1830s to hold imported goods under lock, now hold racks of oak casks, quietly aging single malt whisky. For more than a century and a half, this was illegal, distilling having been banned across the colony since 1839. In 1992, a Hobart man named Bill Lark applied to have that ban overturned, won the first distilling license granted in Tasmania in 153 years, and opened the door for every distillery that followed. The cool island air, the peat in the highlands, the barley grown in the Midlands, all of it turned out to suit whisky as well as anywhere. And the convict-cut cellars that once stored another country's cargo now hold the island's own. What the whisky needs above all is clean water and clean air. And for that, the island has a final, almost unfair advantage.
carried 4,000 kilometers on the wind to the far northwest corner. At Cape Grim, where the cliffs face into the roaring 40s and nothing but open Southern Ocean lies between the land and Antarctica, a monitoring station has measured the air since 1976 and found it, again and again, to be the cleanest in the world. The wind here has crossed thousands of kilometers of empty water before it touches anything, scrubbed clean of everything human, and it arrives at the rock carrying only salt and cold and distance. The same air the convict ships once fought their way through to reach this island is now the thing the island sells. On a headland near that corner, with a wind coming straight off the ocean and the grass bent flat beneath it, a single glass of island whisky is poured and held up against the late light. Amber against grey water, the color deepening the way the leatherwood honey deepened in the jar on the Salamanca trestle, 200 kilometers and one full island away. Everything has pointed here, down the spine of the island, from the waking harbor to the assignment towns to the locked peninsula, and back through the shadow to this. Convict hands cut the stone. The casks rest in it now. The air is the cleanest in the world, and it costs nothing at all. The glass is poured, and the wind keeps coming off the water the way it always has.
By late afternoon, the Salamanca stall that opened with one jar of leatherwood honey lifted into the first light is packing the last crates away. The warehouse walls behind it, going gold and then grey, as the same light that began on the summit of Cunanyi finishes on the harbour where the convict ships once came in. The market has run every Saturday since 1972. Nearly 1 in 5 islanders can name a convict in the family. Off Cape Grim, the afternoon wind arrives, having touched nothing for 4,000 kilometers. The stone was cut in chains, and the cellars hold the casks now. A single glass, amber against grey water,